In life, some things can help you go fast, but others can help you go far. Talent can make you stand out, but it is virtue that helps you stand firm in the long run. The ancients often said talent without virtue is hard to sustain. While virtue will eventually lead to opportunities, but virtue isn't something easily seen, nor is it something that can be expressed in words. It lies in how you live, how you treat others, and even in your silent daily choices. In today's video, we will explore what virtue means in philosophy, why it's important, and how each person can cultivate virtue in modern life. If you want to live more steadily and gain lasting trust, subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to follow more meaningful content. In life, people often focus on success, money, and status. But the more experience we have, the more we realize that external things can change very quickly. What keeps a person standing firm in the long run is not just talent or opportunity, but an inner foundation. And among those fundamental values, virtue is always considered the most important. What does virtue mean, and how should it be understood correctly? Virtue refers to the inner moral qualities of a person, manifested through their thoughts, words, and actions in all circumstances. Virtue is not something abstract or theoretical. It is very present in daily life, through each person's small choices. How you think about others, how you speak, and how you act when no one is watching, all reflect virtue. First and foremost, virtue is manifested in one's way of thinking. A virtuous person typically does not harbor negative thoughts such as envy, hatred, or a desire to belittle others. They may have emotions, but they do not allow those emotions to lead them astray. The right way of thinking helps them maintain clarity. When they are not caught up in negative assumptions, they see problems more clearly and make more rational decisions. Virtue is also clearly demonstrated through speech. A virtuous person usually speaks with moderation, avoids causing harm, and refrains from speaking falsehoods. They understand that words have a great influence, so they do not use them as a tool to hurt others. Furthermore, they know when to speak and when to remain silent. Not everything needs to be said, and it's not always necessary to express one's opinion. Most importantly, virtue is demonstrated through behavior. When faced with self-interest, virtuous people know when to stop. They don't do wrong for short-term gain. They understand that temporary gains are not worth sacrificing long-term values. When faced with difficulties, they don't blame others, but reflect on themselves. When things go well, they don't become arrogant, but remain humble. These qualities create a clear sense of stability in their way of life. Virtue is also shown in how you treat others, especially those who offer no benefit. When you treat those who have nothing to give you with kindness, that is when your virtue is most clearly demonstrated. An important point is that virtue is not something to show off. It doesn't need to be proven or recognized. A virtuous person doesn't need to say they're good. It's their way of life that makes others feel their virtue. Why did the ancients consider virtue to be the foundation? Virtue is like the base. If the foundation is not solid, everything built upon it, no matter how grand, can collapse at any time. The ancients considered virtue to be the foundation because they understood that all external achievements require an internal base to sustain. Without that foundation, what you build may be attainable, but it is very difficult to maintain. Imagine a large house with a weak foundation. Initially, it might stand firm. But over time, exposed to wind, rain, or pressure, cracks will appear. Eventually, it could collapse. Human life is similar. If you have talent but lack virtue, you can still achieve success. But when faced with challenges, or when greater power and benefits arise, you are more likely to make wrong decisions. Those decisions may offer immediate benefits, but they will have long-term consequences. Loss of trust, broken relationships, and instability are common occurrences. Conversely, when virtue is strong, you have a foundation to rely on. No matter how circumstances change, you stay on your path. Don't get swept away by the wrong things. Germany also helps you build trust. In any environment, trust is crucial. When others trust you, they are willing to cooperate, support, and give you opportunities. Trust doesn't come from words, but from consistency in actions. When you keep your word, live honestly, and act responsibly, trust will gradually build. Once trust is built, it becomes a huge asset. It helps you go further without having to prove too much. The ancients also considered virtue to be fundamental because it helps people control themselves. When you have virtue, you know what to do and what to avoid. You don't let fleeting emotions guide your actions. This ability to maintain control is crucial. It helps you avoid many mistakes and keep things stable in your life. Furthermore, virtue helps you maintain lasting relationships. When you live honestly, respectfully, and responsibly, others will want to build long-term relationships with you. These relationships not only provide support, but also create a positive environment for your growth. On a deeper level, virtue helps you maintain inner peace. When you live right, you have fewer regrets. You don't have to worry about what you've done wrong. This peace of mind isn't easily obtained through money or status. It comes from living true to your values. Understanding the role of virtue, you will no longer focus solely on achieving something, but begin to care about how you achieve it. You will not only ask if you can do it, but also if it is the right way. You'll also pay more attention to the small actions, because it's these actions that build the foundation. Every time you make the right choice, you're strengthening your foundation. Ultimately, virtue is not something that can be built in a day. It is the result of continuous practice. But when you persevere, you will create a very solid foundation. And when the foundation is solid, you can build anything on it without fear of it collapsing. That is the profound meaning of considering virtue as the root. Not to limit, but to protect and support your entire life journey. In life, it's not difficult to encounter people who present themselves as good, speaking kind words and creating a positive image in the eyes of others. But over time, people gradually realize something very clear. True virtue doesn't lie in what is said, but in how a person lives when no one is watching. Therefore, virtue is not something to show off, but something that is naturally expressed through actions and how one interacts with others every day. Virtue is not about showing off. Truly virtuous people don't need to prove themselves. They live right, they live kindly, and their actions speak louder than words. A truly virtuous person doesn't worry about whether others acknowledge them or not. They don't need to boast about the good deeds they've done, nor do they try to build an image to receive praise. For them, living right is the right thing to do, not something to show off. When someone constantly feels compelled to prove themselves good, it can sometimes be a sign of inner weakness. They need external validation to feel valued. But true virtue doesn't depend on the opinions of others. Virtuous people often demonstrate consistency. Regardless of the circumstances and whether or not anyone is watching, they maintain the same behavior. This consistency builds trust. They also don't use words to impress. Their words are simple, clear, and unpretentious. But it is precisely this sincerity that makes them trustworthy and approachable. One noticeable trait is that virtuous people don't like to show off. They understand that true value lies not in how much others know, but in how they live their lives. Therefore, they don't need to talk much about themselves. Furthermore, they don't do good deeds for personal gain. In helping others, they don't expect anything in return or recognition. This makes their actions natural and uncalculated. Their kindness is not flashy, but enduring. They may not stand out immediately, but over time, others will gradually notice and appreciate them. Virtue is also demonstrated by knowing when to keep boundaries. A virtuous person doesn't need to interfere in everything or express their opinion in every situation. They know when to speak and when to remain silent. They also don't use comparisons with others as a measure of their worth. They focus on self-improvement rather than proving they are better than others. Therefore, true virtue often goes hand in hand with humility. It's not about belittling oneself, but about not needing to place oneself above others to feel sufficient. This is a story about talented people lacking virtue. There are people who are very capable, but due to selfishness, dishonesty, or contempt for others, they gradually lose trust and opportunities. In reality, there is no shortage of exceptionally capable individuals. They are intelligent, efficient, and achieve good results in a short period of time. Initially, they are often highly regarded and have many opportunities. But without virtue, these advantages are difficult to sustain in the long run. When a person focuses only on their own interests, while disregarding others, they easily create unnecessary conflicts. For example, some people, in their eagerness to achieve quick results, are willing to take credit for their work, disregarding the efforts of their teammates. Initially, this might help them stand out, but in the long run, others will notice. When trust is lost, no matter how capable you are, others will be wary. They may cooperate for mutual benefit, but they won't want to commit long-term. Dishonesty is also a major problem. When a person breaks their word or tells a false story, they may avoid an immediate problem, but they damage their reputation. Reputation is very difficult to build, but very easy to lose. Once lost, it's not easy to regain. And in many cases, missed opportunities will never return. Disregard for others is also a manifestation of a lack of virtue. When a person thinks they are superior and don't need to respect others, they easily create distance. This distance makes it difficult for them to receive support. Others may work with them, but may not genuinely want to help or share. Some people are so overconfident in their abilities that they don't listen to feedback. They think they understand enough and don't need to learn more. This is what causes them to stagnate, while others continue to progress. It's worth noting that when people are talented but lack virtue, they are easily swayed by short-term decisions. They choose what benefits them immediately, without considering the long-term consequences. These decisions may yield quick results, but they are often unsustainable. When problems arise, they struggle to retain their positions and achievements. Conversely, those who are both talented and virtuous tend to start slower, but go further. They build step by step, maintain trust, and forge lasting relationships. This story isn't meant for comparison, but rather to remind you that talent is an advantage, but it's not enough to guarantee a long journey. Virtue is what helps maintain and develop what you have. Once you understand this, you will not only focus on becoming better, but also on how you behave. You will pay more attention to keeping your word, respecting others, and living honestly. You will also understand that not every missed opportunity is due to a lack of skill. Sometimes it's the result of a lack of virtue that you haven't yet realized. Ultimately, Germany doesn't need to prove itself, but its worth is always seen over time. It doesn't produce immediate results, but it determines how far you can go. And when you live with Germany, you not only retain opportunities and relationships, but you also maintain inner peace. That is the deepest and most lasting value. In life, not everyone who stands out the most goes the furthest. There are people who weren't initially exceptionally talented or attention-grabbing, but over time they gain trust, are given important responsibilities, and establish a firm position. Looking deeper, we see that their commonality lies not in outstanding talent, but in something enduring, virtue in their way of life. The story is about people who are trusted because of their virtue. Conversely, there are people who are not particularly outstanding, but always keep their word. Live sincerely and responsibly, so they gradually gain trust and are entrusted with important tasks. Imagine someone entering a workplace with average skills, not exceptionally outstanding compared to those around them. Initially, they aren't the most noticed person. They don't talk much, nor do they try to show off. But they have one thing in common: they see things through to the end. When they take on a job, they strive to complete it on time. If there are problems, they proactively report them beforehand instead of waiting until the last minute. These things may seem small, but they make a big difference. They are also people who keep their word. They make a promise, they try to fulfill it. They can't, they say so clearly and take responsibility. This transparency makes others feel secure working with them. Furthermore, they don't take credit for others' work. When working in a team, they acknowledge the contributions of others. They don't need to be the most outstanding person, but rather focus on achieving the best possible overall result. Initially, these things might go unnoticed. But over time, as others begin to exhibit instability, their own steadfastness becomes more apparent. Superiors began to realize that this was someone they could delegate tasks to without too much worry. Colleagues found it easier to cooperate because there was no unhealthy competition. Gradually, they gained more trust. When important tasks require someone to take responsibility, they are chosen. Not because they are the best, but because they are the most trustworthy. And in many cases, trustworthiness is even more important than competence. Once they gain confidence, opportunities begin to open up. They are given bigger tasks and involved in more important decisions. Through this process, their capabilities continue to develop. The remarkable thing is that they don't need to try to impress. The way they live and work creates the impression. And that's the most lasting kind of impression. This story illustrates one thing very clearly. Virtue doesn't make you stand out immediately, but it helps you stand firm in the long run. When others can rely on you, you have a very solid position in any environment. Virtue is demonstrated through how you treat others, especially those who don't benefit you. The way you treat them best reflects your true character. In life, how you treat people who benefit you often doesn't fully reflect who you are. Because when there's a benefit to be gained, everyone tends to behave better. What truly reveals virtue is how you treat those who don't benefit you in any way. It could be a waiter, a security guard, a quiet colleague, or someone incapable of helping you advance. When there's nothing to gain, how you behave is the most genuine thing. A virtuous person will maintain respect in all circumstances. They do not discriminate based on position or interests. They understand that everyone has their own value and deserves to be treated kindly. They don't speak disrespectfully, use contemptuous attitudes, or belittle others. Even when disagreeing, they maintain politeness. This not only reflects their personality, but also creates a positive environment around them. Others feel comfortable interacting with them and are more willing to cooperate. Conversely, if a person is only kind to those who benefit them, but cold or disrespectful to others, it will soon be noticed. And once it's noticed, trust will be affected. An important point is that how you treat the underprivileged reflects very clearly who you are. When you are in a higher position, you have a certain amount of power. How you use that power shows who you are. If you use power to impose or pressure, you may achieve immediate results, but it will create distance. If you use it to support and facilitate, you will build respect. Virtue is also demonstrated in fairness. You don't take sides for personal gain. You try to judge issues based on right and wrong, not on emotions or relationships. Furthermore, virtuous people often know how to put themselves in others' shoes. They don't rush to judge, but try to understand the situation. This understanding helps them avoid many unnecessary conflicts. On a deeper level, when you treat people kindly without expecting anything in return, you are building your own character. You are not dependent on circumstances to decide how to behave. This creates stability within you. You don't change according to self-interest, but maintain a certain standard. Over time, these actions build a reputation. Not a reputation built through publicity, but one that is passed on through the experiences of others. And this kind of reputation is very lasting. Ultimately, virtue lies not in grand gestures, but in how you live your life in the small details. When you keep your word, live honestly, and treat everyone kindly, you are building a very solid foundation. From that foundation, trust will come, opportunities will arise, and relationships will become stronger. And most importantly, you will maintain inner peace, something that not all success can bring. In the journey of self-improvement, many people often focus on easily visible things like achievements, skills, or outward appearance. But there is something much more subtle, deeper, and more enduring: virtue. Virtue isn't something you say to make others believe, but something others perceive through how you live each day. And among the many manifestations of virtue, words and actions, when unseen, are the two clearest measures. Virtue is expressed through words. A virtuous person usually speaks truthfully, avoids hurting others, and does not use words to exploit or manipulate. Words are one of the most powerful tools a person possesses. With just a few words, you can make others feel respected, comforted, or conversely, deeply hurt. Therefore, the way a person uses words clearly reflects their inner self and character. A virtuous person is not necessarily the best speaker, but the one who speaks truthfully and with moderation. They don't use words to impress, but to convey clarity and good intentions. Sincerity is the first element. When they speak, they don't try to create an image or hide their intentions. What they say comes from their true thoughts, without beating around the bush to achieve personal goals. It is this sincerity that gives their words weight. They are also very careful about hurting others, not because they are afraid of offending anyone, but because they understand that words can leave a lasting impression. An unintentional remark may be forgotten by the speaker, but it can linger in the listener's mind for a long time. This doesn't mean they avoid the truth. Virtuous people still speak the truth when necessary, but they choose the right way to say it. They know how to adjust their words and timing so that the truth is received without causing unnecessary hurt. Another important point is that they don't use words to manipulate. They don't speak to lead others to their will by pressuring them or creating feelings of guilt. They respect other people's right to choose. In communication, they also dislike gossiping or spreading negative information. They understand that such stories bring no value and can harm others and the surrounding environment. Virtuous people know when to be silent. It's not always necessary to offer opinions, and not everything needs commenting on. Timely silence sometimes demonstrates a deeper understanding than words. They also don't exaggerate. They don't promise things they're not sure they can deliver, and they don't say things that go beyond the truth. This helps them maintain credibility in their words. Over time, their words inspire trust. When they speak, others tend to believe them because they know that behind those words lies sincerity and responsibility. Virtue is demonstrated through actions when no one is watching. What you do when no one is observing is the true measure of morality. While words can be adjusted to suit the circumstances, it is actions taken when no one is watching that reveal true nature. Without supervision or judgment, people will act according to their inner selves. Virtuous people maintain consistency between their outward and inner selves. They don't need others watching to do the right thing. They do it because they know it's the right thing to do. For example, at work, even when no one is checking, they still complete their tasks diligently. They don't compromise on quality just because they think no one will find out. In their lives, they uphold their personal principles, even without external pressure. They don't do wrong just because they have the opportunity. This demonstrates a very high level of self-discipline. It's worth noting that actions taken when no one is watching often involve small choices. Picking up an item that doesn't belong to you, keep it or return it, doing something that benefits you but affects someone else, choose to do it or not. These moments, though small, are incredibly important. Virtuous people often choose what is right, even when no one else knows. Because for them, value lies not in being recognized, but in upholding their own standards. They also don't take advantage of others' absence to do wrong. For example, they don't speak ill of others behind their backs, or do anything detrimental to them when they're not around. This creates a great deal of trust. When others know that you maintain your composure even when no one is watching, they feel more secure working with or associating with you. Acting in the shadows also directly affects one's inner self. When you do something wrong, even if no one knows, you still know. And that can create inner insecurity. Conversely, when you do the right thing, you have a sense of stability. You don't need to worry or hide. Its lightness is part of peace. A profound truth is that actions taken when no one is watching are what shape your character. Every small choice contributes to a habit, and habits shape character. When you consistently choose what is right, you naturally become a virtuous person. You don't need to try to show it because that way of life has become a part of you. Conversely, if you consistently choose the wrong path when no one knows, you might maintain a good outward image, but inwardly, you will gradually lose your stability. Ultimately, virtue doesn't lie in grand or rare things. It lies in how you speak each day and how you behave in moments when no one is watching. When you speak truthfully, without hurting others, and without using words to manipulate, you are building virtue through your words. When you uphold your principles and do what is right, even when no one is watching, you are building virtue through your actions. These two elements combine to create a very solid foundation. From that foundation, you not only gain the trust of others, but also find inner peace. That is the deepest and most enduring value of virtue. In life, many people focus heavily on how to be better, faster, and achieve more. But after a while, they realize that there are people who aren't necessarily the most outstanding, but who go very far and maintain their position for a long time. The difference lies not only in ability, but in a deeper foundation, virtue in their daily lives and conduct. Why virtue helps you go further? Virtuous people are more easily trusted, more easily helped, and more easily build lasting relationships. This is a crucial foundation for long-term success. In any environment, trust is always the core element. When others trust you, they are willing to cooperate, share opportunities, and support you when needed. And this trust doesn't come from words, but from how you live. Virtuous people tend to be consistent. They say what they mean and try to do it. They fail to do something, they frankly take responsibility. This clarity makes others feel secure working with them. Once trust is established, everything becomes easier. You don't need to prove yourself as much every time you start a new relationship. Others tend to open up more quickly because they sense trustworthiness. Furthermore, virtuous people are often more likely to receive help, not because they ask for it, but because their way of life inspires others to want to assist them. When you treat others with kindness, respect, and without exploiting them, you create a positive cycle. Within that circle, when you encounter difficulties, there will be people ready to help you overcome them. This is a huge advantage that not everyone has. Germany also helps you build lasting relationships. These relationships are not based on short-term gains, but on long-term trust and respect. When a relationship is strong, you have a foundation to grow on. You don't have to constantly start over, and you don't have to spend time rebuilding trust from scratch. An important point is that virtue helps you avoid unnecessary risks. When you live right, you are less likely to make wrong decisions for short-term gain. This helps you preserve what you have built. Conversely, without integrity, you might achieve results quickly, but it will be difficult to sustain. When trust is lost, opportunities also narrow, and rebuilding it is often much harder than maintaining it from scratch. Virtue also helps you maintain inner stability. When you live rightly, you are less torn between what you should do and what is beneficial. You don't have to worry about the consequences of wrong actions. This stability helps you make clearer decisions. You're not swept away by fleeting emotions or external pressures. This is crucial during difficult times. On a deeper level, Germany helps you go far because it creates resilience. When you have a solid foundation, you're not easily shaken. You might go slower at first, but you go more steadily. Over time, this certainty becomes a huge advantage. While others struggle or stop, you keep moving forward. Signs that you are cultivating virtue include keeping your word, apologizing when you are wrong, being patient at the right time, and avoiding wrongdoing even if it benefits you. Building virtue isn't about grand gestures. It starts with very small actions, but repeated regularly every day. There are clear signs that you're on the right track. First and foremost is keeping your word. When you say something, you try to fulfill it. Even small promises are valued. This shows respect for others and for yourself. Keeping your word is not just about completing a task, it's about commitment. When you keep your word, you're building credibility. Credibility is one of the most important assets. Another sign is knowing how to apologize when wrong. Not everyone finds it easy to admit their mistakes. Many choose to avoid the issue or shift blame. But when you can sincerely apologize, you are demonstrating honesty and responsibility. This doesn't diminish you, it makes you more trustworthy. Knowing when to be patient is also a sign of virtue. It's not always necessary to react immediately. In some situations, remaining calm and avoiding argument is the better option. Patience is not weakness, but self-control. You understand that not everything is worth arguing about. You choose to maintain harmony and focus on what matters more. One very clear sign is that you don't do the wrong thing even if it benefits you. This is a big challenge because immediate benefits are often very tempting. When you can refuse to do something wrong, even if it's beneficial, you're building a very solid foundation. You're prioritizing long-term values over short-term gains. In addition, you begin to pay more attention to how you behave. You think before you speak, consider before you act, and are mindful of how you affect others. You also compare yourself to others less and feel less compelled to prove yourself. Instead of striving to be better than others, you focus on self-improvement. This helps you maintain calmness and stability. Another sign is that you feel lighter when you live authentically. You don't have to worry about hiding or explaining. Clarity in how you live brings peace. Over time, these changes make a noticeable difference. Others begin to trust you more, respect you more, and want to build a long-term relationship with you. Ultimately, building virtue is a process. It has no endpoint, but is a continuous journey. Each day, you have the opportunity to choose to live a little more rightly. When you persevere with those choices, you are creating a very solid foundation for your life. From this foundation, you will not only go further, but also more smoothly and sustainably. And that is the profound value of virtue. It's not something to show off, but something to uphold. It's not to surpass others, but to become a stronger, more resilient version of oneself. In the journey to building a stable and valuable life, many people often seek complex methods or grand gestures. But in reality, The foundation of a virtuous person begins with very basic things. It's not something far-fetched, but rather how you live each day, how you confront yourself and others. Among these, honesty and tolerance are the two most important pillars that help to sustainably form and nurture virtue. The first method is to live honestly. Honesty with others and with oneself is the most important foundation for building virtue. Honesty is not just about not lying, it's deeper. It's about being straightforward and clear in thought, word, and deed. When a person lives honestly, they don't need to hide or create an image that's different from who they truly are. Honesty towards others is primarily demonstrated by speaking the truth. However, this doesn't mean speaking bluntly without consideration, but rather speaking truthfully with respect and good intentions. An honest person does not use words to deceive or manipulate others. They also don't make promises they're not sure they can deliver. Once they say something, they consciously follow through. If there are mistakes, they admit them instead of trying to justify them. This clarity creates immense trust. In relationships, honesty simplifies things. You don't have to remember what you said to cover up something else. You don't have to worry about being found out. This ease helps you maintain inner peace. But more importantly, being honest with yourself is the deepest foundation. Many people may not lie to others, but they easily deceive themselves. They avoid their weaknesses, are afraid to look at their mistakes, or try to justify their actions. When you're not honest with yourself, it's hard to change, because you don't see the problem clearly. You might think you're right when you're not. This leads you to repeat old mistakes. Conversely, when you dare to look honestly at yourself, you will clearly see where you stand. You will know what you need to improve. This self-awareness is the first step towards growth. Being true to yourself also helps you make the right choices. You don't chase what others expect, but choose what aligns with your own values. This helps you live authentically and have fewer regrets. An important point is that honesty helps you build credibility over time. Credibility doesn't come from one big act, but from consistency in many small actions. When you are always clear and trustworthy, others will gradually trust you. This reputation is the foundation for many opportunities. In the workplace, people choose to work with trustworthy individuals. In life, people choose to associate with sincere people. Honesty is the key to achieving that. The second method is cultivating tolerance. Knowing how to forgive, not holding grudges, and not harboring resentment will lighten your heart and deepen your virtue. If honesty helps you build inner strength, then tolerance helps you maintain harmony in relationships. This is a crucial element because humans don't live alone. They are constantly interacting with others. Tolerance doesn't mean ignoring everything or accepting wrongdoing. It's the ability to understand that everyone has limits. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes, and not everything is worth holding on to. In life, there will be times when you are misunderstood, treated unfairly, or hurt. If you hold on to all of that, your inner self will become burdened. Resentment is like an invisible burden. You may not express it, but it still affects how you think and behave. It makes you prone to negative reactions. It makes it difficult to remain calm. When you learn to forgive, you not only free others, but more importantly, you free yourself. You are no longer bound by negative emotions. Tolerance also helps you see things from a broader perspective. You don't rush to judge or conclude. You understand that everyone has their own circumstances, and sometimes their actions stem from things you don't see. This helps reduce conflict. When you don't nitpick about every little thing, relationships become smoother. You don't have to argue to win, but choose to maintain harmony. A tolerant person usually makes others feel comfortable. They don't put pressure on others, don't dwell on their mistakes, and don't create tension. Therefore, they find it easier to build lasting relationships. Others feel safe around them, knowing they won't be judged too harshly. Tolerance also helps you grow as a person. When you're not caught up in blaming others, you have more energy to reflect on yourself. You focus on improving instead of comparing yourself to others or harboring resentment. An important point is that tolerance doesn't mean having no boundaries. You still need to know what's acceptable and what's not. But instead of holding grudges, you choose to handle things clearly and decisively. When you combine honesty and tolerance, you create a very solid foundation. Honesty helps you be clear with yourself and others. Tolerance helps you maintain harmony in relationships. These two elements complement each other. Honesty without tolerance can become rigid. Tolerance without honesty can become unclear. When you balance both, you are both firm and flexible. Ultimately, building virtue isn't something that happens in a single day. It's the result of small, repeated choices each day. Every time you choose honesty over concealment, every time you choose forgiveness over resentment, you're taking another step forward. Over time, those small steps create big changes. You become a more trustworthy, gentle, and stable person. And from there, your life gradually becomes more stable and meaningful. That is the true value of virtue. It's not something to show off, but something to live by. Not something to be praised, but something to create a life with lasting foundation and meaning. In the journey of building a strong, valuable, and trustworthy person, many often seek grand things or quick fixes. But in reality, the deepest foundation of a sustainable life is formed from very small, repeated actions every day. Among these, keeping one's word is one of the most important methods for cultivating virtue. And when viewed more broadly, we understand that virtue is not something to be shown off, something to be accumulated through concrete actions. The third method is to keep your word in everything you do. Even a small promise needs to be fulfilled. When you keep your word, you are building long-term value for yourself. Trustworthiness is not a luxury. It begins with small commitments in daily life. This could be keeping an appointment on time, completing a task assigned, or making a simple promise to a family member or colleague. Many people often overlook small things, thinking they are unimportant. But in reality, these small things are the foundation of trust. When you consistently keep your word in small matters, others will believe that you will also keep your word in bigger matters. Keeping one's word first and foremost means keeping one's promise. When you say you will do something, you consciously do it. Not because you are forced, but because you respect your word. This demonstrates seriousness in one's way of life. If there's a reason you can't fulfill your obligations, you proactively inform others and take responsibility. You don't remain silent or evade the issue. This clarity helps others understand and maintain their trust. An important point is that keeping your word isn't just about other people, it's about yourself. When you make a promise to yourself, you need to strive to fulfill it. For example, a study plan, a good habit, or a personal goal. When you constantly break promises to yourself, you gradually lose faith in yourself. Conversely, when you keep your commitments, you build self-confidence and discipline. Integrity is also demonstrated through consistency. You don't change your behavior depending on circumstances or self-interest. Regardless of the situation, you maintain your principles. This creates stability and trustworthiness. In the workplace, people who keep their word are often given important tasks, not because they are the best, but because they are the most trustworthy. When a job requires certainty, people will look to someone with integrity. In relationships, trustworthiness creates peace of mind. When you know the other person keeps their word, you don't have to worry or doubt. This helps build a stronger relationship. Conversely, once trust is lost, it is very difficult to rebuild. One broken promise can lead to long-term distrust. Therefore, keeping one's word is not a one-time thing, but a continuous process. It's worth noting that keeping your word sometimes requires sacrifice. There are times when you have to work harder to turn down easier options in order to keep your promise. But it is precisely those moments that make your integrity valuable. Over time, trustworthiness becomes an intangible asset. You don't need to talk much about yourself, but the way you keep your word earns you respect from others. And this asset can open up many opportunities. In summary, the profound meaning of virtue is that it is not something to be displayed, but something to be accumulated. When you live righteously and virtuously, virtue will gradually grow and become a solid foundation for your life. Looking back on the entire journey, we see that virtue is not an abstract concept. It is present in every choice, every action, and every way you treat others. Virtue is not something that can be built in a day. It is the result of long-term accumulation. Every time you keep your word, every time you choose honesty, every time you are tolerant, you are adding a piece to your foundation. The important thing is that Germany doesn't need to show off. It doesn't need immediate recognition. Germany's value lies in its sustainability. Over time, others will sense and trust you. When virtue is sufficiently strong, it becomes a very solid foundation. From this foundation, you can build your career, relationships, and life in a stable way. Without that foundation, things can be achieved quickly, but they are difficult to sustain in the long run. When faced with challenges, what is not solid will easily crumble. Virtue also helps you stay on the right path. In difficult situations or temptations, virtue is what helps you distinguish between what should and shouldn't be done. You won't be swept away by immediate gains. Furthermore, virtue brings inner peace. When you live right, you don't have to worry about the consequences of wrong actions. You have a sense of stability and lightness. On a deeper level, Germany helps you become a better version of yourself. You don't need to be better than others, but focus on self-improvement. Over time, this change will not only affect you, but also spread to those around you. Create a positive environment where trust and respect are built. Ultimately, virtue is not a goal to be achieved, but a journey to live. When you persevere with the right values, you will gradually find your life becoming clearer, more stable, and more meaningful. And when you look back, you'll realize that the most valuable thing isn't what you achieved, but the person you became. A person with virtue, a solid foundation, and the ability to go far and sustainably in life. Life may have its ups and downs, but those with virtue will always have a firm footing. When you live kindly, keep your word, and think of others, you not only build trust, but also create lasting value for yourself. If you find this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to cultivate more enduring values together every day.